it's really easy for a lot of people like me to quit, to walk into a room and to be the only blank. It happens every day. But to have organizations like NC-WIT who say, hey, we see the work you do and we see the value it has, that's what encourages you to stick around and to keep working towards it.
Welcome back to Coding Colored Glasses, the show where I teach you how to level up your coding journey. I'm Lynn Trevellis, and today I have someone who I consider a tech sister, a friend, and a powerhouse with passion and purpose driving her every move. Today I'm joined by Bemi, a rising force in computational biology and neuroscience, and currently a research intern at Carnegie Mellon University. She's also a 2025 NC-WIT National Award winner, MIT Class of 2029 admit, Red Cross Club president, all while holding down a job and leading with grace in her Pittsburgh community. In this episode, we're unpacking what it means to thrive in STEM without burning out your humanity. From modeling neuro decision-making to restarting her school's Red Cross Club, Bemi is defining leadership, intelligence, and advocacy all on her own terms. And she's just getting started. We'll talk about hustle, identity, and what drives her curiosity across tech and medicine, plus the lessons she's learned along the way from balancing work, school, and service with a passion. So, Bemi, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Do you have anything you'd like to introduce or say to the viewers?
No, I think you really captured it. My name is Bemi, and I am so excited to be here. I don't know how glamorous my journey has been, but I'm happy to give whatever insight that may help whoever comes after me.
Perfect. So let's start with a little bit about you and your journey. We know that you are definitely interested in tech and medicine. So how did you first get your foot in the door at places, being a research intern at Carnegie Mellon and going down the path of computational biology and neuroscience research?
Some people won't believe me, but I'm just a geek. Like, I'm not even pretending to be like a geek or to look smart. I genuinely eat, sleep, and breathe learning. It brings me genuine joy. I used to take people's tests for fun in elementary school, which you shouldn't do, but I've always enjoyed the challenge of learning. So science has always been a big part of my life. I started with astronomy, and then I just kind of delved into every subject I could think of. Chemistry, biology, whatever. And initially, this began as me just exploring all these, learning all these new facts that I never understood. I always wanted to understand how the world around me worked. But it got to a point at the beginning of my junior year of high school where I got sick of watching. I got sick of being on the outskirts of all these incredible advancements in research and tech that all these people were doing. And I thought, you know what? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Who says I can't be a part of all this technology and science that I love reading about so much? So I sat down one of these weekends where I was reading research papers for fun, and I thought I could be on one of these papers. So I gathered about 20 researchers and professors from the University of Pittsburgh, which is my city university, and I told them, hey, I read this last paper of yours. I'm really interested in your subject matter. This is my resume. Please let me know if you have any space to onboard me. I think the work you're doing is great. And I met with one of my counselors at school later that week, and I told her what my plan was, and she was kind of like, do you have time for that? And I was like, no, but I have passion. And that's one thing everyone could say about me, is that I have passion. So we sent out 20 emails that day, and of the 20, 12 never responded. 6 said no. One person offered to interview me and then proceeded to ghost me, but one person said yes. And that's all it takes. And I've been with that lab for the past 2 years, and it has fundamentally changed my life.
So a little bit of a follow-up question for you. What is your favorite thing about working in that lab, and how has it changed your passion for STEM?
Oh my goodness. This is also going to sound a bit odd. So the professor I reached out to is with the University of Pittsburgh, but he works under a lab at CMU. So I work for CMU, but I work for University of Pittsburgh professor. But I would say the best part, and what I learned to love the most about being a member of that lab, was knowing absolutely nothing. Like, jack diddly squat. Every week I would go in, and I would be dreading it a little bit, because I was like, I know nothing. But working with that lab and learning all the cool neuroscience and computation work I did showed me the beauty and power of admitting you know nothing and of going in purely ready to learn. I left that every week knowing something I didn't know before. And that was an incredible experience. I had an incredible PI. I had incredible lab mates who were nothing but kind and nurturing, but also were willing to say, hey, this code you wrote doesn't make any sense, and this is not going to solve the problem you want it to solve. So I had an incredible environment that allowed me to foster and grow as an individual, learning to be comfortable with failure, and then as a scientist, seeing what it's like to truly know nothing.
I love that so much. I'm so happy that you got the chance to experience that. And it's all about that passion and that drive and the fact that especially when it comes to admitting that you know nothing, I think that nowadays there's a lot of beauty in just saying that you know nothing, because we're in such an age of like information overload where basically anyone can become like an overnight expert if they really put the time and effort into it. So I really love how you expressed like, I was just happy to basically be there and soak up the knowledge. I think that that's really incredible and amazing. And I think that it leads into our next question of balance and burnout quite wonderfully, especially after you talked about the fact that you were like, do I really have time? No, but I'm gonna make time so I can pursue the things that I want to pursue. So how do you manage your time and still stay connected with your personal life? Because learning is one of the harder pursuits in life, because it just takes so much dedication and like passion for what you're learning about. So how do you manage not only learning the multiple classes that you took in school, managing those, while also learning new things at a lab, and also making sure that you're staying connected with your personal life?
Yeah. Going into my junior year, my AP language and composition teacher told me something funny. He told our whole class this. Going into your junior year and into the later stages of life, there are 3 things you get to pick from: social life, sleep, and good academics. Pick 2. So going into my junior year, that was kind of my perspective of you can't have it all. And in a way, I think that's right. I ended up picking my academics and my social life, and my sleep really suffered. And, through junior year, it actually wasn't that big of a problem. But as I got into senior year, I developed all of these terrible sleep and health habits that really took a toll on me, and that I'm still recovering from as a graduated senior. So the advice I'd like to give about dealing with burnout is you can't have it all, you should want it all. And you should try and make every sacrifice possible to have it all. Yes, I have an incredible support system. I had the privilege of not being in a financial situation where I had to work for myself. I have a job, but that's because I choose to have one. And that was an incredible privilege that I'm not going to discount. But sometimes that means taking 1 or 2 shifts a week instead of taking 3 or 4. For me, that meant every time somebody invites you out, you say yes 3 out of those 4 times because you need to go home and sleep. And that means never pulling another all-nighter, because anything you don't know by midnight, you're not going to know. You want to have it all. You want to have academics and sleep and the social life. And I got a taste of every one of them in one way or another in the past 4 years. But I also learned that if you push too hard to have one of more than the rest, everything else suffered. I let my sleep suffer, and that really took a toll on my physical and mental health. If you want to avoid burnout, part of me recognizes that it seems a bit unavoidable. Every time young women and scientists and people in positions of power are met with this question, how do you deal with burnout? How do you deal with burnout? It kind of seems like it's something we're all going to deal with. And I had it in my head that I was going to be able to avoid it for a little bit longer. It wasn't going to get me in high school, but it did. So rather than avoiding burnout, I would say mitigating and managing burnout. How can you prevent it for as long as possible? And then how can, when it eventually catches you, you do everything in your power to keep yourself safe and healthy? I would say you need to funnel. The reality is I loved my research. It's what gave me life. I love to learn. I love to code. But every week that I walked in knowing nothing was another week that I was just overloading myself, trying to catch up to people years ahead of me in my field. And what that meant in reality was maybe I couldn't go volunteer at the local hospital that week. Maybe I needed to take a break from my research because I had an essay due, because I was a student before I was a scientist. You are always playing a game of priorities. And the reality is you want it all, you can't have it all. So balancing and giving myself space to understand like it's okay if I can't meet everything, and being surrounded by people who love and respect me and recognize that I can't do everything, really made it a lot easier for me to get through those last 2 years of high school that were particularly tough. I think passion is a big part of it. I feel like a lot of people my age, in the pursuit of college admissions or scholarships or whatnot, really throw themselves into really hard pursuits, these passion projects that lack any passion. That will kill you. I was able to stay up at nights and weekends and write papers and write lines of code about my research because ultimately I was passionate about it. And you make the time for the things you're passionate about. But if you're not doing it for yourself, for the love of the game, you're doing it for whatever reason you feel you have to, you are going to be so much more miserable.
I really love that answer. And I think it's one of those things that our culture really, right now, really values that, like, overcompensating for life using optimism and being like, oh, okay, girl, like, just self-care your way through it and do your face mask, take a breather, sleep, you're gonna get through this, you can have your cake and eat it too. And that is so not true, especially for our high school students. I know this junior year almost took me out. I'm not gonna lie, that was rough.
It's kind of the reality. It's like everyone says, like, yeah, self-care your way through it. You got it. Like, if you manage your time well, you'll be fine. And in a way, that's true. But I think you can't operate at a certain level without eventually hitting some sort of roadblock. Like, if you want to be working with the best of the best, you're going to see that some of these kids and some of these people who are pushing themselves too far. And there's a big part of recognizing that, yeah, we all may be in the pursuit of greatness, but a lot of people will push themselves over the cliff before they ever get there. I come from a small school district without a lot of really high intensity kids. But there's another school district, a bigger one that's close to us, that are known for having these crazy intense kids. And there was a time where I was really envious of them. I was like, they are doing it all and I need to be doing more to catch up with them. And then I finally ended up becoming close to some of them and I realized just how miserable it made them. And in the end, they didn't accomplish more or less necessarily than any of us did. You can't balance it. If the life you're living isn't sustainable, it's not the life you're meant to live. You know yourself, and you may want to push yourself to be better, and I respect it. I get it. But it's part of knowing yourself is knowing there's no better to go. You're just going downhill after that point.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's so sad in a way that we all feel that we're all trying to play superheroes and try to save the world while being socially conscious, being emotionally conscious, being present in school, being present in extracurriculars, and still trying everybody being on our back. Because I know a lot of times my parents would tell me, oh, like, you need to manage your time better. You need to manage your time better. And it's about that acknowledgement.
Against you. You never felt like you were doing enough.
Exactly. You just always feel like you're pushing and pushing and pushing. And of course, eventually you reach that ceiling of burnout. And what I think a lot of teens don't understand is how to really mitigate burnout and make sure that you're not falling into a cycle where you're just burnt out beyond repair, where you can bounce back. So that leads me to my next question. How do you deal with burnout specifically?
Part of it, I'm going to speak first about what's preventative. Because if you're conscious about how you build your schedules, when burnout comes for you, you'll look back and thank your past self. And that's, don't sign yourself up for everything everyone offers to you. I made that mistake in my first 3 years of high school. Somebody said, do you want to do this opportunity? Do you want to lead this organization? And I wanted to so bad, to be the face of everything. And I got a lot of meaningful growth from all of these activities that I did that had nothing to do with what I wanted. But you get to a point where you can't handle that anymore. So when I experienced really bad burnout my senior year, I found myself being the head of all these clubs and having obligations to all these organizations that I just couldn't take care of. So the first thing I would say about managing burnout is be preventative and be conscious. It's important to explore new things and try new things that you don't know if you're interested or not outside of your career or your main passions, but you shouldn't overload yourself with them because when, you're between a rock and a hard place, all of those things are still waiting for you to give them attention. In terms of dealing with it, you have to recognize that you're going to fail the people around you. And that doesn't feel good ever. But if you don't fail the people around you, you're going to fail yourself. You can't make every deadline. You can't meet every club meeting. Sometimes you need to say, I cannot be there for anyone but myself right now. And sometimes that's just sleeping for hours and hours and hours. I feel like a lot of young people aren't properly educated about the risks and dangers of chronic sleep deprivation. And I learned that firsthand, how badly that can destroy your physical and mental health. It alters who you are, and the people around you notice. When you stop sleeping, your brain stops recovering. You're doing irreparable neurological damage to yourself. Sleep, sleep, sleep. My teacher, my junior year, said pick 3, social life, grades, or sleep. People should pick sleep more often. I should have picked sleep, because that would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of health issues that I'm still working through now that I've left high school. Otherwise, I would say, remember what brings you joy. I am a geek. I am a nerd. I do academic things for fun. That does bring me joy, but it can also be the source of my burnout. So I have to remember all of the non-academic things that, make me feel like I'm alive. I love reading trashy romance novels. I like to cook and try new recipes. I like to see my friends. So when you're dealing with a really bad period of burnout, sometimes you need to take a step away from the lab. Sometimes you need to say, hey, maybe I'm not going to make the ISEF deadline this year, and I just need to go have dinner with my best friends, or read that new book that I've been putting off because I didn't think I had the time. Or maybe I need to sleep from midnight till noon the next day. Whatever it is, you need to give yourself time to feel human again. And oftentimes, whenever you've signed yourself up for all of these responsibilities, you feel like you don't even get the chance, because everyone's got a deadline for you. And that's where you have to get used to failing people.
And that idea of failing people is so crucial for a lot of people to understand. A lot of people will put themselves, I know for me, earlier this year, I tried to put so many clubs in so many different organizations, their priorities ahead of my priorities. But you can't pour into another cup when your cup is empty. If you have nothing in there,
That's the perfect way to say it. That is the perfect way to say it. You cannot pour into another cup when your own cup is empty. And I spent so much time trying to pour into other people's cups, and my cup was empty. And I was so confused why it wasn't working.
And you just have to get used to the idea of saying no. But absolutely. I think where a lot of people struggle is they don't know who to say no to and how to prioritize what cup we're going to pour into. And especially when you mention like, oh, when do I prioritize sleep over academics? When do I prioritize, social life over sleep, or this over sleep? So how do you decide when to say no, especially looking back on your formative years in high school? When were the times you're looking at yourself, your junior year, your sophomore year self, and you're like, girl, you should have said no. You should have ran screaming, crying, and kicking away.
I have so many situations like that, but I'll spare you and only list a few. The way I like to prioritize, is with the hierarchy of needs. It's this concept in psychology that, you have to have your basic needs fulfilled before you can step up the ladder and take care of more complex things. And your first basic need is food, shelter, water. Luckily, for most of us living in America, that's handled. But if you're somebody who doesn't have the financial privilege of not working for your own well-being, that comes first. If your job puts food on your plate and clothes on your back, that becomes your priority. That's not a problem I had to struggle with, so I move up the ladder. Okay, then it becomes my physical health. And this is something that I fail to prioritize a lot. Exercise. It makes you a better test taker. It makes you a better thinker. It gives you peace of mind. It allows you to sleep better. Take care of your physical health. Then we go up our hierarchy of needs. Once you've taken care of where your next meal is coming from, where your next paycheck is coming from, where you're going to sleep, and how strong your body is, your health, now you can think about your mental. I did so many clubs that brought me nothing but misery. I say there are 2 types of people whose opinions matter in this life. People who pay me and people I'm paying. I was a part of clubs that brought me no joy just because I felt like I was under some obligation to be there. And the reality is, you're not. I did mock trial for 3 years because I loved the teachers at my school who ran mock trial. But I hated it. I dreaded mock trial season coming up. I dreaded the fact that it took 3 months of my life. I dreaded going to the courtroom. And I'm not a very nervous person. I don't get nervous standing up and talking in front of people. The closest I ever come to having a panic attack was every year doing mock trial. I got to my senior year and I was like, this doesn't bring me joy. And it's not responsible for the lower parts of my triangle. Why am I doing it? As much as it didn't feel good to quit on those teachers that I loved, those were people I had to say no to. because it was taking so much more out of me than it was giving to me. I think in a society that's so focused on the entire world, we're so connected nowadays. Social media makes us see every conflict that's ever happened. In a weird way, there's times where we need to be more selfish as individuals. We need to say, I can't save the world and I can't help everyone. So you should be a part of your community. You should give back. You should want to, because that community sowed the seeds that let you get there. But ultimately, you can't pour from an empty cup. And if your cup is empty, you need to start cutting out some of those responsibilities. That's how I decide who I say no to. Does it put food on my plate? Does it put clothes on my back? Does it bring me joy? If it can't satisfy at least two of those, it may need to be on the outs.
Yeah, very, very powerful words, Bemi. I really appreciated you diving and helping our readers help understand that a lot more, because I feel that even after we tell people it's okay to say no, it's okay to be selfish, it's okay to, and of course, like, selfishness in moderation. Let's not clip that too much, but
we write a thin line.
Exactly, on that, to really, prioritize yourself when that cup is empty. Understanding that, like, there are people who are just gonna get put on the outside, and it really does not matter. Again, like you said, it does not matter if that person is not paying you, that person is not putting any food on your plate, that person is not giving you clothes, not giving you any money, they are not giving you rides. All they giving you is some
go.
Exactly. You can find good conversation anywhere, and I promise nobody's gonna hate you any more or any less that they were gonna hate you if you quit a club, or if you prioritize yourself, or if you sleep. Like, no grade is ever worth you falling into, patterns of depression. I know I struggled a lot with that, and I actually gave myself a rule after freshman year. It's called the 1B rule, and I know a lot of, like, the really, high performance kids are like, 1B rule? Why would you ever, like, go out of your way to get a B? And I know it sounds really crazy, but I know every single year my goal at school is not to be, like, the perfect student, because I'm not the perfect student, and I genuinely, there's classes that I don't really care for. And part of the 1B rule was kind of saving myself from that identity of superwoman, of trying to save the world, because I feel like, especially as a young Black woman in America expects you to be it all. They think that Black women are strong, independent Black women. We can do everything and much more. We can save Earth and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, and we just can't do it. So part of establishing that 1B rule was, like, making it a priority for me to learn, not just to excel or try to go out of my way to get a grade without learning anything. Because I see a lot of high performing students go and get the grades, but what did they really come away from in the experience? Basically, that they have to sacrifice themselves in order to, be at the top, or be this, paragon of academic excellence. And in reality, straight A's, while it's an amazing accomplishment, and that's awesome that you have straight A's, part of the straight A's, some of the straight A's that I would see, they didn't come from a genuine place. They didn't come because they were genuinely interested in trying classes. They were interested in, whatever subject they were learning about, or trying to get better, or actually learning and absorbing information. So part of that, having that role for myself, is just, like, giving me a cushion that it's okay to fail. You can allow yourself some grace to, like, have that cushion and be able to be like, okay, I need to sleep. I cannot prioritize this class right now. That's fine. And you give yourself that cushion and that grace to be able to get up and prioritize the 6 other classes you got going on, the 5 other people you got to worry about at home, the job that you got that might put money for you to be fly so you could feel good at school, and all those different things. So I'm so happy that you got to expand a lot more on burnout, and I think that a lot of wonderful gems. So if you're enjoying this episode, make sure you hit the follow button so you're notified every single time I post another podcast episode. So let's move into a little bit more about tech and your identity. So you've done a lot of work in computational biology and neuroscience. So how has your identity as a Black woman, especially as a Nigerian Black American women influenced the way that you approached science and research?
And this kind of reflects a little bit back on the burnout conversation. For a lot of young Black women, I know for myself at least, we feel this pressure and the societal pressure that if your classmates have to go a meter, we have to go a mile. We have to do 2, 3, 4 times as much work to be treated with half as much respect of our peers of other identity groups. And a lot of us feel this overwhelming need to combat our stereotypes. To say, well, I'm not this, all of these negative stereotypes that are associated with a lot of people of our demographic. And especially when you come from a community or a system that doesn't have a lot of good examples for what young Black women can be, you feel even more pressure to fight that stereotype and say, I'm not like them. But that's not good for you, and it's not good for your community. So my approach to research is influenced not only by my Nigerian heritage, but also by my experience of being a Black woman in America. Because the reality is, I wasn't Black before I came to the United States. That was an identity that was forced on me by proxy of living here. And that was something I really had to come to terms with as I entered the beginnings of my professional academic career. There's a saying that if you don't find a Nigerian somewhere, the place is inhabitable. Because Nigerians occupy every place, every continent, every profession on earth. If you don't find a Nigerian, you are unable to accomplish whatever that task is. And that really influences a lot of my work. Nigeria's greatest export is its people. We're known for our resilience, for our brilliance, and so that was always like a part of who I was. I always had to go out there and be the best, because that is who Nigerians are. And I really am thankful for that cultural identity, because in a way, that kept me going when I felt like a lot of my peers may not have had something else to hold on to. I said, this is how Nigerians are. We work hard, we play hard, and we get stuff done. But being in the United States, I'm not really recognized as a Nigerian woman. Yes, I have the Nigerian name, but I don't have the accent. I have the citizenship, but who's going to ask that? In the United States, I am an African American woman. That is my perception. And the dichotomy between my true cultural identity as a Nigerian, as a Yoruba woman, and that as what I am perceived by when I enter a room, really presented an obstacle for me growing up. Because I was stuck between wanting to have camaraderie with a community of Black Americans living in the United States who experienced similar struggles to me, and also wanting my unique cultural identity to be respected. The reality is, any research institution I walk into, any science fair, any organization, their first perception of me is a Black woman. And a lot of people don't care to learn the difference. And you know what? You have to get up there and you have to be willing and proud to represent whatever community you are a part of. I am happy to enter a room and be setting a good example for all the young Black women who didn't get to see someone like me when they were growing up, when they were going to school, who find themselves caught between being a part of a certain stereotype or another, who feel like there's nowhere to aspire to outside of the detriments of their own unique communities. I'm not saying Nigerians are perfect. Not whatsoever. Every community has its deep, deep flaws and traumas that we're all trying to recover from. But really, my identity has given me the power and the confidence and the mindset to keep pushing, to always be the best. And so it brings me a lot of joy, and to me it feels like an obligation to get out there and represent myself well for every Nigerian American who feels like they're caught in the middle between two countries and two continents, for every Black American, regardless of what their ethnicity is or their cultural background or how much they know about where they're from, because we're all living in a system that doesn't work for us. And we're all just trying to make it work and make it ourselves thrive.
I love that, especially myself as a Haitian American woman, especially that push and pull between being perceived as one thing, knowing that you're something else, and maybe not always fitting into the group that you're supposed to be a part of, or not understanding the plights of another group that you're perceived to be, and always being put on stage as like, okay, I'm the representation. I'm setting the standard for what people deem Haitian women to look like, or what Yoruba women to look like. I'm presenting myself as a role model, and of course you definitely have to honor that position, the position that you're uniquely put in, to give people an opportunity to interact with this community in a way they might not have seen it before. And it could definitely put some pressure on your back. You could definitely feel it when you're doing those big things, whether you're giving a talk, accepting an award, or just being academically gifted or being the best in your class, you can definitely feel that pressure. But it's definitely one of those things that I appreciate about being an immigrant, about being a Black woman, that I give people the opportunity to interact with communities in a different light and set that role model, that example, that like, it's not, Black women have multiple different ways that they can appear in the world, and we have multiple different people. We have all types of amazingly academically gifted people, of people who can sing, people who can do this, and people who are gifted in so many different ways. So
and it's okay to resent being put in that box, but it's not okay to resent the communities that you're working for. So I think it's also really important that a lot of, especially immigrant women, don't let themselves be put in the model minority box, because it can feel good to be told that you're different than the rest and that you're better for one reason or another. But ultimately, that's still playing into the same system that's putting you in that box. We're all people, we're all diverse, we're all different, we all have our own interests, and we're capable of incredible things. But the reality is, when you step outside of your house, you are a representative, and you will do your best to be the best representative you can.
Exactly. And it just goes back to that, like, having like a service mindset, and that even though you can truly resent that box, of course, feeling like you're always on display in a way,
responsibility.
Like, why do I have to be like the person, all eyes are on me, especially like if you're the only Black woman in a room, all eyes are on you. It's always about like, how is she gonna perform? It's never about other people. But at the end of the day, again, it's really important what you said about not falling into that model minority myth. It's about uplifting your community and making sure that you're a steward to your community, because of the unique time that we are in right now, that we get to be in a space where we are changing narratives about how people are supposed to be perceived, and making sure that it's not just another stereotype that we're setting, but it's opening and broadening people to new perspectives, and opening their minds to understand that people are not a monolith, that there's all different types of humans, that there's all different types of ways to be brilliant. Speaking of brilliance, let's talk more about your research at Carnegie Mellon. So what specifically drew you to studying neuroscience and biology?
So I was always one of those really annoying kids who kept asking why. Why is the sky blue? Because of this. Why does this do that? Why? It drove my parents up the wall. So what my dad did to give me an outlet for all of these questions I had that sometimes they couldn't answer was to get me a subscription to some science media outlet, like the Science Channel on whatever TV station that we had. And I fell in love. I fell in love with this idea that there were groups of people who only ever wanted to ask why. And so when I really got into science, I was like, oh, they have all the answers. This is perfect. All I've ever wanted is answers. But when you really get into science, what you learn is we don't have any of the answers. The beauty is in the pursuit of the answers, because every answer you find opens up a million new questions you didn't have before. That's what made me realize science was for me. That's what made me realize I couldn't see myself doing any other subject, any other discipline, because I had all these questions and I just couldn't let them go. Why biology and neuroscience specifically? Well, I started in physics. I started in astronomy, and I saw all this beauty in these giant distant galaxies. But I was an individual. I live on Earth. I interact with people. I experience disease. I experience health. I experience society. So as much as I wanted to answer all these giant questions about physics and the nature of reality itself, I'm a bit selfish, I guess, and I wanted to understand more about the nature of my own reality and my own day-to-day. And there's nothing more individualistic than medicine. It's about the pursuit of the body, the understanding of our health. And once you realize how much our health relies on these biological processes, this chemistry, this biology, these systems, you realize in avoiding the big systems of physics, you fall into the big systems of biology and chemistry anyways. I am a studier of systems. I am a lover of complex systems themselves. And I don't believe there's anything more complex than human health and the human body. How that drew me to computation is a bit of a funny story, and it's actually a question we'll touch on a bit later. I actually had no interest in computer science when I started. I wanted to do pure cancer research. I wanted to understand where our health fails. I got signed up for a coding class my freshman year of high school as a graduation requirement, and I hated every second of it. I thought it was the worst thing ever because it was some like Python-based graphics coding, and I'm a terrible artist. So I really said coding was not for me. But among all the things I am a realist, and I'm passionate about solving problems and about being a part of healthcare. And as I got older and older and I read all these research papers for fun, I increasingly saw that scientists had to employ technology to answer our big questions and to pose the new ones. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be in the rooms where they were asking these questions and where they were solving these problems. And the reality is there's no way to do that for any field, no matter if you're in the humanities or STEM or whatever niche, without technology. So I originally started as this begrudging, symbiotic relationship with tech. I needed it to get the answers I was looking for. But as a lover of systems, once you start in computer science and once you see the beauty of the work you can do and the theory that goes into making it happen, you realize that the brain that I wanted to study so badly is exactly like a computer. In some ways significantly more sophisticated, in other ways significantly more rudimentary. And the beauty that drew me to science, those questions of why, how, ultimately were best answered and were best outletted in some sort of computational bioscience.
I just answer, of course, but I definitely resonate with that, like, being pulled into tech by, like, the skin of your teeth, because I definitely was a humanities girly. You could find my nose in any book. I read like a madman, and people who know me know that I am definitely a Black culture enthusiast. In fact, this summer I'll be attending TAS to study critical Black studies. I love the humanities, I love social science, and I love political science. And I think one thing that tech just does really well is it gives us something to look at when we talk about these overarching, broad, maybe theories would be a good word. Yeah, theories about life and ways for us to model that in a way that makes sense to
100%.
other people. And especially when it comes to biology, it's so imperative for us to be able to see what's going on.
My goodness.
Yeah. And that is one thing that I think just tech just does a great job of bridging that gap and making sure that we can see what we're talking about. So we're not just, talking about broad things, because you can talk about theory, about DNA, about, genes and cells all you want. But if you can't see what is going on so you can dive deeper into how to fix the problem, or if you don't have an answer to the problem, then what is the point of all the talk?
They say seeing is believing, and I live, sleep and breathe science communication, and technology is the greatest tool humanity has ever invented for science communication.
Exactly. 10 out of 10. So what is something specifically that you find beautiful or unexpected about the human brain that's really stuck with you, especially viewing it from like a technology lens?
We've all had like an iPhone app that lags, or like a computer that like just won't connect to Wi-Fi, and you think it's so frustrating, right? You're like, how can this machine just not do what it needs to do? The thing that I found the most beautiful about working with neurological data is how flawed and kind of sucky our brains are. They are a paradox in like incredible efficiency and ridiculous fallacies. Like, a lot of people don't realize just how many ways your brain fails you every day. And I think it was in one of the first neuroscience classes that I got to take at the University of Pittsburgh that really showed that to me. If you want to understand where your brain fails you, look into the science of illusions, or even look at an illusion. Every one of those images you see online where it says focus on the middle and the world will start to spin, your brain is this agent of perception. It is your only ticket to understanding and processing the outside world, and it is so incredibly bad at it that it circumvents and becomes very good at it. Your brain is kind of like, imagine you're in a room with no windows and no light in it, completely dark. And then I'm standing outside of that room and I'm shouting to you what's outside. That's the relationship between your eyes and your brain. Your brain has no connection to the outside world. It lives in your cranium. It only perceives the world through your senses, through your ears, through your eyes, through all of these like sensory systems we have. But when you really think about it, it's like that phone you have that won't connect to Wi-Fi sometimes. It's doing the best it can with all this information it's being overloaded with, but it inevitably fails. And some of those failures can create the most beautiful art and illusions that we've ever seen, or they can create really like negative societal detriments, like discrimination, like these kind of fallacies where your brain is just trying to recognize patterns and it builds into these whole societal problems. But it's, in an odd way, the most oxymoronic, hypocritical thing about the brain that I think is the most beautiful. It is this incredible system that, if you stop to think about it, keeps us alive. And that takes so much more work than you realize. But it's also kind of like a toddler in the way it fails in the most rudimentary and odd senses.
I love that. And I think that we all need to really be grateful for our brain today. Like, if you haven't said thank you to your brain,
if you haven't thought about all the work your brain does for you today,
right, if you haven't thought about all the work that your body has been doing for you while you are watching this episode, probably sitting, doing whatever other activity, give your brain a pat on the back, because even though it's inevitably, failing you in all types of ways, like you've just beautifully explained, it still is able to put together such an awesome world that we're able to experience. And even though it has its problems, it has its moments where it's not connected to the Wi-Fi. That's okay, because we're able to experience such a unique experience that no other organism on Earth gets to live through. Like the fact that we're able to have these conversations, be able to have this
spoken languages.
Exactly.
It's really ridiculous when you think about it.
Exactly. And I think that's just I really agree with your answer. If I was a neuroscientist or an aspiring neuroscientist, I probably had the same answer as you. That was an amazing answer. But building into that, like, you just talked a little bit about how the brain fails you in so many different ways and is still able to create all the things that we can see outside of ourselves. So what was the moment that you realized that science itself was something that you're shaping your life around, and that your work, especially as an aspiring neuroscientist or as a neuroscientist, was something that you really wanted to pursue and make your life be about?
So before I joined my lab, I had to do a 6-week onboarding course. And this was kind of like a trial for students who wanted to join the lab. And I was terrified. I had little to no computer science experience before I started. I was the youngest person in that class by far. But I made it through. And I was able to start my first research project. And my first research project was into the ways our brain fails, our perception, how we mistake or increasingly become worse in our understanding of the outside world. And it wasn't in presenting that project or any of the accolades I got for it that made me realize, oh crap, this is it. Like, this is what I will do with the rest of my life. It was the first time I was able to create a figure in MATLAB. For those of you who don't know what MATLAB is, it's Matrix Laboratory. It's a Python-based programming language that is heavily used in engineering for modeling. It's not a beginner programming language. It's a high-level multi-threaded one, and it was actually my first one. So I spent a lot of time crying over MATLAB. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people who have taken it, used it in college, in school, and graduate studies hate it. And in a way, I kind of will always hate it, but I'll always love it. The first time I realized that I was meant to be in science and to be in tech was the first time I got that figure to populate. It took me days. I stayed up till 4 a.m. for 3 days in a row, just writing out code on I have a whiteboard in my room. I write out code on the whiteboard. I'm trying to walk myself through all of these loops, these for loops, to see where they're failing. When that figure populated with all of those beautiful lines and colors and the legend that was totally in the wrong place, I thought, oh my God, I have to do this for the rest of my life. It was the single most gratifying experience I ever had. And I went and I was so excited. I brought it to my PI, I brought it to my lab, and he said, this is really good. You need to change everything about it. So
Oh my God, no.
I went home and I did it again. And I did it again and again and again. And for the past 2 years, that's all I've done is write MATLAB scripts and have to change them all over again. But I've learned so much about the brain, about computers, about coding. I genuinely could not imagine myself studying anything but computational neuroscience.
Wow, that's like every time you like tell a story, I'm just like captivated. I'm like, yes, like that's me. Like that's literally me. You don't even get it. I remember in freshman year when I was first learning how to make a website, because this was the year I was like really getting deeper into politics, and I think I forgot what issue I was trying to cover. But I just remember wanting people to like hear my opinions and my thoughts, and I was like, I'm gonna learn how to make a website, and I'm gonna be like a Dr. Seuss, and I'm gonna make like my own fake name and have a website where I speak about issues that I'm passionate about, because I don't want to be on social media and people tear me up. So I was doing HTML, learning how to do free code camp, which is obviously not as hard as MATLAB, but it was definitely a journey, because I spent a lot of time sitting in the back of Spanish classes trying to learn how to do HTML. And I remember one day I was having such a terrible problem with one of the bugs. Like I had a bug in probably like in the JavaScript, and like I probably forgot a colon or something stupid, really stupid.
It's
and
so
I was
easy
like,
to just mess up something.
Exactly. And I messed it up, and I was like, I was so angered because I just could not get it to work, and I was searching forums and there was no answer to my question, and I was like,
and this is before ChatGPT and all the AI. So you have to figure it out, or you have to find someone who knew.
Exactly. Somebody had to know. You were searching the Stack Overflow and there was no answer. The answer's from
There never was.
Exactly. And then I figured it out all on my own. I've never felt smarter than at that moment when I figured it out. Even now, harder things. Exactly. That's how they get you. Right there. When you figure it out and you feel like the single most smartest person, not even Albert Einstein can touch you, tech has got you in their hook, just like that.
And I never got off that hook.
Exactly. I think.
Power to you, because for all of the MATLAB scripts I write, I will never do front-end development. I will never do UI. I will never do websites. I couldn't even center a div button if you begged me to. So power to that work, because those who cannot do should at least admire.
Exactly. And I'm happy that people, after I made that first website, I made a couple others, and I also realized that front-end development is just not my forte. I'm more of a data science girl and learning to tell the story behind the numbers.
Let's crunch some numbers.
Exactly. But let's talk a little bit about NC-WIT and the National Award, especially both of us being tech girlies and winning this year. So how did winning that award really change how you see yourself in tech? Because I know we talked a little bit about like that first like spark that was like, okay, yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life and sit here and figure this all out. And how did like winning that award really validate how you felt about your tech journey and your tech story?
Absolutely. So I talked about this a little bit, but I never saw myself as a tech person. I saw myself as a science person. So when I entered my junior year of high school and I suddenly had to be doing all this tech, I felt a little bit like an imposter. I wasn't there to be a computer scientist or a software engineer. I was there because I like had to be. And I learned to love it, but I didn't feel like I was a part of tech. NC-WIT is what changed that. And that is an organization that I will be eternally thankful for. I applied 2 years in a row, my junior year, because my counselor said, hey, I think this looks good for you based on the work you've been doing with CMU. I think you should apply. And you know what I told her? I was like, why would I ever do that? But I did anyways, and I was a regional rising star. For people who aren't familiar with NC-WIT's award structure for aspirations in computing, a regional rising star is the lowest level of recognition they give. And, I got that. I got the email. I went to the award ceremony my junior year of high school. I was like, you know what? This is nice, but kind of whatever. And then I moved on with my life, and I came to my senior year of high school. And I was applying to colleges, and I was going through all this stuff with my physical health. And my mom was like, hey, you should apply again. And I was like, why would I do that? But they pushed the deadline twice, and I turned it in the day it was due anyways. Because you know what? Every time you ask yourself, why should I do that? Ask yourself, why not? And NCWIT saw the work I was doing, and they thought it was worthy of recognition, and they gave me the opportunity to meet some of the greatest girls I've ever met, yourself not included. What NCWIT gave me in my experience with tech was a community that I never thought I could have. I met some of my best friends who are going to the same school as me. I met kids who are going to schools that I'd only dreamed of. Like, I think in my head, growing up was this big abstract thing. But, like, I have friends who are going to Ivy Leagues or going to Caltech. And, like, that was hard to wrap my head around. Because NCWIT saw me and said, you have potential. And they said, let me introduce you to all of your peers and your age mates who have that potential. We want you to work together. We want you to know each other. We want you to share opportunities. And that altered how I saw my future in tech. Knowing that NCWIT would always be there for me as a background, as an introduction, as a networking tool, but also showed me that there were people like me who had entered tech one way or another. There were people like me who saw my struggles or saw my difficulties or experienced similar things. There were girls like me. There were immigrant girls like me. There were Black girls like me. That was invaluable. And that's what said, hey, tech might have gotten you hook, line, and sinker when you solved that first bug, but NCWIT and organizations like that are what's going to keep you. It's really easy for a lot of people like me to quit, to walk into a room and to be the only blank. It happens every day. But to have organizations like NCWIT who say, hey, we see the work you do and we see the value it has, that's what encourages you to stick around and to keep working towards it.
Yeah, and I definitely felt the same way, especially when I went to the award ceremony. I think it really made me feel like I was not the only one, not only just not the only one, that it wasn't too much to be doing what I was doing. It wasn't too much that I was interested in all these like things that to a lot of my friends, and especially where I'm from, what I'm doing is always like, girl, you're doing the most. Like,
yeah, like why are you doing all that?
Exactly. And it was simply all these girls were doing it for the love of the game. And it wasn't like
there's nothing
a competition. Like exactly. And I think that is
loveliest people I've ever met have been through NCWIT. Some of my best friends going into my freshman year of college are from NCWIT. I'll always have that background. And that, I think, is so much more power to them.
Exactly. And, I think that is... So it's one of those really powerful things that remind you why we need diverse, equitable and inclusive awards, why we need recognition for separate groups to make sure that like girls like us and girls who were at that ceremony not only get the flowers and are not overshadowed by the insurmountable, almost insurmountable amount of privilege that a lot of other people have over them, that they're recognized for their genius, for their brilliance, for their dedication to their communities, and that it also makes sure that we're giving people who might have been like you, Bemi, who have been introduced to tech in the most odd ways, but have decided to stick around. And I think that that's really important. And I think that leads into our next question of what do you wish more young Black girls knew about pursuing research and leadership in terms of STEM?
You're going to walk into a lot of rooms and you're going to be the only one. Let your accomplishments and your competence speak for you. If you're going to be afraid every time you're the only whatever in a room, the only woman, the only Black woman, the only person of color, you will spend your life afraid. You live in a country, in a system that does not look for people like you to succeed. And that can be demoralizing and exhausting. And I don't blame you. There were nights where I would think to myself, why is this my burden? Why is this my problem? But it is. And you can sit and you can sulk and you can martyr your life in the name of, I shouldn't have to work this hard. But the reality is, it's only your life. You can either make something of it, or you can bemoan all of the things that happened before you were born that made your life difficult. Give yourself space to grieve the life you could have had if you had more privilege, and then suck it up and move on. You will be the only person in the room. So you better be the best in the room. Not because you're expected to, not because you have to go a mile when your classmates have to go a meter, but because you should want to. And you should see and want to be that role model for other young girls in your community. You should want to be successful because that's what gives life meaning. You should want to be accomplished. You should want to make the world a better place. Society thrives when old men grow trees under which the shade they will never lie. Grow trees for your community. You didn't get shade because somebody before you didn't put in the work, and that's not fair. But you shouldn't be that person. Be the person, the community builder that you needed. And know that when you put in the work and you get the accomplishments, people will scoff their nose and they'll say this and that about how you did it, but you can't argue with results.
We really can't. And with that, guys, I think that wraps up this awesome episode with Bemi. Thank you so much for coming on, girl. I really appreciate all your answers, all the insight that you were able to give. Lots of gems in this episode, so if you made it to the end, you know where the follow button is. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like, favorite this episode, and share it with all your favorite tech girlies. And with that, Bemi, do you have any final words?
Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this experience to reflect on a lot of what brought me here and a lot of what I hope to carry with me. It has been an absolute pleasure, as always, to speak to you. And anyone watching, I apologize for how much my screen is moving, if that's going to make you motion sick. I recognize that I'm doing a nice little periodic circle there, but I hope you enjoyed hearing what I have to say, and I hope that everyone who listens will go on to make the change in their community that they want to see.
And I'm hoping that too. With that, this is Elsie, signing out.